nerderotic.com.
And then, of course, you get the Valerians and the Targaryens coming in, who have the very exotic names with all the AEs and the Ys and the odd spellings, like Daenerys Targaryen, which was a pretty exotic name, I thought, and bespoke an exotic past that went well with the silver hair and the purple eyes and so forth. It is somewhat startling that I receive all these baby pictures on the email of little girls who are being named Daenerys, and
Nihilism, the rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. Philosophy, extreme skepticism, maintaining that nothing in the world has real existence. Postmodernism, a late 20th century style and concept in the arts, architecture, and criticism that represents a departure from modernism and has at its heart a general distrust of grand theories and ideologies, as well as a problematic relationship with any notion of art. And the moral to that story is wait for a book series to finish before you name your daughters after the main character. George is all about teaching us lessons, and I'm starting to think that George is the world's biggest and greatest troll. Welcome back to Nerdrotic. My name is Gary Beekler, and I come to you from nerdrotic.com, and we need to talk about Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 5, A Kick in the Bells, because that is what the fandom just received, in my opinion, for the third time in a row. Now, some of you have joined me after the long night. Some of you came around after the last of the Starks. And after the bells, more of you have arrived. More disappointed Game of Thrones fans. All are welcome here. I look forward to seeing the rest of you after next week. The spoilers are out there. Everybody knows the spoilers. This is just like watching a very, very slow car crash. Now, with the bells, it wasn't as much the messy plot. I thought that episode was a great representation of what Game of Thrones has become, a complete and utter mess. All of our characters, and that's what we need to focus on, have regressed completely. Daenerys regressed, turned on a dime. There was a more natural progression between good and evil with Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith. There was a more natural progression between good and evil between Harry Osborn and Peter Parker skipping rocks on a lake and then causing the death of Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man 2. We will get back to the Mad Queen, but what this episode is most guilty of, despite some technical stuff and some repeated shots, is character regression. We have Varys, the Master of Whispers, or the Master of Morons. I don't know how he expected to put Jon on the Iron Throne over Daenerys with quill, parchment, and one little bird. It looks to me like a suicide mission to get out of Season 8 as quickly as possible, but he has help from his friend Tyrion. Rats him out without batting an eye. Tyrion snitches end up in ditches. And Peter Dinklage has my greatest sympathies because he has put in a brilliant performance with horrid writing. And there was one good, genuine scene with him between him and Jaime. But other than that, Tyrion is not acting like Tyrion. But poor Varys went out like a man, even though he's missing some of the vital elements. Varys was, of course, executed for betraying Daenerys because he wants Jon to sit in the throne. He confronted Jon about this on the beach. And of course, Jon did the Stark thing and said, no, she is my queen, even though he doesn't want to do the deed. We'll get to that later. And again, I don't know what Varys was expecting to get out of this other than he didn't want to be outdone by Littlefinger, and apparently two of the smartest characters in the show are allergic to Northerners. Mind you, we are in the penultimate episode of 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, and we have not gotten full-on Mad Queen Daenerys. That has not happened yet, but Varys figured it out because she got dissed at a northern feast, and she stopped eating. Now, I know there was more to it than that, but it doesn't feel like there was more to it than that. Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, at least up until Season 7, and some of you will argue Season 8, has been a very, very good show at subverting character tropes. And having two women vying for the throne was a very interesting story, but they reverted again. What was Daenerys' big turning point? Not getting kissed well enough by her nephew. Or as some of you put it in the live stream last night, Jon should have just given her the D. Not a very strong female empowerment message there. So Varys gets executed. Dany's descent into madness is about 10 minutes of screen time. Jon does something stupid. Tyrion betrays somebody. Then we find out Jaime Lannister got caught crossing the lines, and Daenerys takes him prisoner. And I gotta stop asking questions like, how does she know that Jaime isn't going to fight for her? Did he admit it? How did he get caught crossing the lines? There isn't that much of the army left. But it's Dan and Dave, Dumb and Dumber, and I'm going to stop asking these questions at this point. Jaime is caught. Why? To further the plot for some reason. He ends up doing nothing, by the way, but Tyrion, of course, frees him, and this is where we get the best scene of season 8. The genuine moment between Jaime and Tyrion. And I'm wondering if this was the last scene they filmed together, because Peter Dinklage just killed it in this scene. It was good, but that was it for this episode. There's a hell of a lot of people walking slowly and looking stern and concerned in this episode. We have lots of scenes of crowds looking very concerned and moving into King's Landing. We have Arya and the Hound looking very concerned and arriving at King's Landing. And this would be a really good time to use your faceless men power, but maybe she's protesting because it's not faceless women. Daenerys executed Varys pretty quick, but she didn't notice Tyrion scheming. Now, he has been looking deeply concerned for everybody the first half an hour of the episode. He pleads for the people of King's Landing. He asks Davos to help smuggle his brother out after he frees him from Daenerys, and Davos doesn't bat an eye. And I gotta stop asking questions like, why doesn't the Onion Knight bat an eye about this? Oh, and Tyrion also mentions about 35 times that they need to surrender when they hear the bells. Please surrender if you hear the bells. Reminder, if you hear the bells, surrender. We get a lot more exposition. We finally get to see this vaunted Golden Company and homeless Harry Strickland standing in front of the Red Keep. And then I realize nothing has happened for 30 minutes. And Daenerys finally arrives. And when do we get the first shot of Dragon Flame? At the 36-minute, 46-second mark of a 56-minute episode. By the way, so much for the extended episodes. I can hear some of you now arguing, what do you mean nothing happened? Tyrion betrayed Varys and he got executed. Jon didn't give Dany the D and it turned her evil. Jaime was freed by Tyrion Lannister. This would all be great if this was episode 6 of season 5. This is the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones, and the action didn't start till 36 minutes into the episode, and that's not it. Daenerys comes in, and many people have brought up, why don't they armor the dragons in Game of Thrones? And they decided to do that. I think Arya loaned Drogon some of her plot armor, because Drogon flies in and doesn't get hit by one scorpion, and all of a sudden wipes out the Iron Fleet, wipes out the scorpions, and when she lands Drogon on a perch after what was 7 minutes of fighting, the battle for King's Landing is over. The Lannister soldiers throw down their weapons after a brief, tense moment. We are at the 43-minute and 37-second mark. We still don't officially have a Mad Queen. Of course, this was intercut with Jaime getting into the city and Arya and the Hound getting into the city and Cersei looking out a window and Qyburn continually telling her to surrender. The surrender bells ring, and at the 46-minute, 44-second mark, Daenerys turns into the Mad Queen, the breaker of chains, the one who locked up her dragons because they burned a child, has turned to burning children on the streets. But apparently it was just the little boys, because they sure made a point of showing all the little girls being abandoned. We had Jaime. I remind you that Tyrion freed him to talk to Cersei to help surrender, and Jaime screwed this up as well. And the only reason he ended up getting in there was so they could have him fight Euron, who came out of nowhere, who borrowed Arya's plot armor and survived this dragon attack, only to magically find Jaime in this one solitary spot in King's Landing, and they fight over Cersei. Jaime beats him, but Euron thinks he dealt Jaime the mortal blow, and he dies smiling because he thinks he killed the Kingslayer. And not unlike Arya with her gut wound in Braavos, Jaime continues to walk through the castle, bleeding out, looking for Cersei. Cersei finally listens to Qyburn and surrenders, and her and the Mountain and Qyburn go down to Maegor's Holdfast, and she inexplicably survives the Hound confronting the Mountain when the Hound doesn't do anything ring and lets her walk by. But of course, the mountain kills Qyburn, squashes him up against the wall. Cersei heads down to the holdfast by herself, where she finds Jaime. She decides she wants her baby to live. Jaime says nothing is more important than us, and then a bunch of rubble falls on them and they die. Just like that. The end of Cersei Lannister and Jaime Lannister, two of the best characters on television, had a bunch of rubble dumped on them. That's it. Again, not a great message of female empowerment when Cersei spends the entire episode crying and looking out a window. But don't worry, they'll keep making the men look like complete idiots in service of 2019 politics. Jaime, who had the best redemption arc in A Song of Ice and Fire and at the beginning of Game of Thrones, lost his honor, lost his hand, lost his children, decided to retain his honor, help Brienne, help the Stark girls, fight the dead. Turns out he just got a hair up his ass and wanted to get laid, and now he wants to go back to Cersei and die like an idiot. Didn't I say that all of our favorite characters would survive the dead just to go down to the south, do stupid things and die? Well, that's what's happening. Then, of course, there is the Hound and Clegane Bowl. Talk about forced. This was one of the worst regressions of character. We had the build-up and the redemption of the Hound for him just to go back and fight his brother. Yay, we got Clegane Bowl, and they both fought. This battle was just fan service with a little side of nihilism. Completely meaningless. So many characters that have redeemed themselves willing to just walk off to their death. What is this, Westeros world? And again with those questions, let's just forget that Sandor Clegane is the younger brother of Gregor Clegane. But you don't understand, man. We're subverting the expectations of the heteronormative patriarchal tropes of epic fantasy. Back to character regression, we had Grey Worm slaughtering innocents. We had Jon Snow as a glorified extra. He really just didn't give up the D, didn't kiss very well, looked concerned a lot, saved a King's Landing woman from being raped by a Northern soldier, killed that guy. I guess that's what he was brought back for the dead for. But he's been utterly useless. And you know what I blame? The man bun. What the hell is he still doing with a man bun? It's not 2015. Arya Stark. We followed her for an exorbitant amount of time in the episode, and all she did was get on a horsey. And yes, I know the symbolism. She is death. Well, she certainly is, because she couldn't save anybody. With the proper build-up, say an entire season, the Mad Queen would have completely worked. It would have completed A Song of Ice and Fire. It would actually make sense after the Night King with the proper build-up. But man, I'm so glad we got to see Euron fighting a one-handed Jaime badly on a beach. We got to see Arya failing to save little girls. We got to see Daenerys frying little boys. We got to see Jon and his man bun trying to keep people from getting raped. We see Tyrion walking around an active battlefield and nobody paying attention to the hand of the queen at all. We get to see Arya not use her faceless men power whatsoever. And we got to see Clegane Bowl. That was so much better than, say, I don't know, Gregor Clegane fighting the Night King, or Gregor Clegane and Bronn and Ghost fighting the undead in King's Landing. Man, this was so much better. All this talk of subverting expectation, and they actually delivered on the Clegane Bowl. Wouldn't it have been better, those two fighting each other and then having to team up to fight the undead? Oh, bro, that's too basic, bro. That's fan fiction. Yeah, that would have sucked. All this in the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones, and thankfully, and I can't believe I'm saying this, it's almost over. Now, the crowds have been getting bigger in our live streams because more and more people are upset, and we don't blame you. And if you still like the show, I don't blame you either. This goes straight on the shoulders of George R.R. Martin, Dan and Dave, and HBO. They all share the blame, and they want us to buy into a prequel. The one thing I do know is HBO, George R.R. Martin, and Dan and Dave all got paid. And none of us are getting our time back. So we might as well waste one more hour and 20 minutes and see this thing through to the end. And I look forward to seeing more of you here in the next live stream, which will be 15 minutes after the episode airs on Sunday night, right here on Nerdrotic. I also do pre-Game of Thrones. That is 4:30 p.m. Pacific time on my other channel. Please consider subscribing, Nerdrotic Live. Go to nerdrotic.com for my live stream schedule. There will be more Game of Thrones videos throughout the week. Everybody have a great day, and may the small folks sing songs of your greatness.
nerderotic.com. Please subscribe.